The Lizard Man of South Carolina. The beast no one can explain, the encounter that changed everything. The car's digital clock showed 2:17 a.m. when Christopher Davis, a 17-year-old, finished changing the flat tire on his Chevrolet, the deserted road cutting through the Scape Ore swamps in Lee County. South Carolina was immersed in a disturbing silence that early morning of June 29, 1988. Chris closed the trunk with a sigh of relief. That's when he heard it, the sound of breaking branches in the darkness among the cypresses. Instinctively, he pointed his flashlight toward the noise. His eyes widened as the blood froze in his veins. 2 red dots glowed between the trees. Not reflections, but eyes. Eyes that watched him. Before he could process what he was seeing, the creature advanced into the clarity of the flashlight beam. It was tall, more than 7 feet bipedal, with greenish skin covered in scales. Its face, a grotesque mixture of reptile and humanoid, contorted into an expression that Chris could only describe as hunger. The young man dropped the flashlight and lunged into the car, but he wasn't fast enough. The creature reached the vehicle in 3 strides, its claws tearing through the metal roof as if it were paper. Chris started the engine and accelerated desperately, while the being clung to the car. Only after nearly 2 kilometers at maximum speed did the creature finally let go, disappearing into the darkness of the swamp when Chris arrived home, trembling and in shock. The rearview mirror revealed 3 deep scratches on his right arm, but nothing compared to the marks left on the roof of his Chevrolet, incontrovertible evidence that something had tried to get in. What Chris didn't know was that his encounter with the Lizard Man was just the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt South Carolina for decades. The first sightings, the truth about the South Carolina Lizard Man, is more complex and disturbing than most people imagine. Christopher Davis's account in 1988 only brought to light a secret that the inhabitants of rural Lee County had known for generations, but preferred not to discuss with strangers. Forgotten documents in the archives of the Bishopville Municipal Library reveal that the first reports of the creature date back to the 1940s, when alligator hunters began noticing unusual footprints on the swamp banks, deep impressions, similar to human ones, but with distinctive claw marks that no known animal could leave. In 1952, a group of fishermen reported seeing a tall, greenish figure watching them from the shadows before diving into the water with surprising speed. The incident was recorded by the local sheriff as a possible unusual alligator sighting, the first of many occurrences that would be systematically classified under convenient explanations. Mary Jenkins, now 93 and one of Bishopville's oldest residents, shared with me a secret kept for 7 decades. When I was a girl, my father and the other men from the Baptist church would gather once a month to patrol the edges of the swamp. They carried shotguns and wooden stakes. I never understood why the stakes, since they weren't useful for alligators. Now I know. Mary paused, her gaze lost in memories. They weren't hunting alligators. They were protecting the community from something that couldn't be openly mentioned. When I asked why the community kept silent for so long, Mary's answer was simple and chilling. Some creatures gain strength when you talk about them. The more attention you give them, the more powerful they become. The Davis phenomenon and media explosion. Christopher Davis's account in 1988 changed everything. Unlike previous sightings, kept secret by a fearful community, Chris took his story directly to the sheriff's department and subsequently to the press. Examination of the car revealed inexplicable damage to the metal roof, claw marks that could not have been made by conventional tools. The polygraph test that Davis passed without problems only intensified the mystery. Soon, local newspapers featured headlines about the Lizard Man of Scape Ore Swamp. What began as local curiosity quickly transformed into a national phenomenon. In less than 2 weeks after the Davis incident, more than a dozen new sightings were reported. Paranormal investigation teams, amateur cryptozoologists, and monster hunters invaded Lee County, But not everyone was there to investigate. The tourism of the unexplained found its new magnet, Bishopville, a small town that barely appeared on maps, suddenly found itself hosting a lizard man festival, with merchants selling everything from t-shirts to chocolate claws. Sheriff Liston Truesdale, responsible for the original investigation, confided to me years later that the situation completely spiraled out of control. At first, we were genuinely investigating something we couldn't explain. Then, when the cameras arrived and the circus set up, it became impossible to separate legitimate reports from fabricated ones. A disturbing detail that rarely appears in sensationalist documentaries. In the 2 weeks following Davis's report, 3 different film crews captured partial images of the creature. The footage, confiscated by the FBI under the claim of technical analysis, was never returned or released. Jack Thompson, former cameraman for Weltex, was one of those who managed to film something on the night of July 14, 1988. It was something between a crocodile and a man, but it moved like nothing I'd ever seen. The tape clearly showed the eyes reflecting red in the dark. 2 days later, federal agents showed up at the studio with a court order. When asked if he believed the government was covering up the existence of the creature, Thompson responded enigmatically, "I don't know if they were covering up its existence or its origin. The theories and hidden pattern over the years, various theories have emerged to explain the lizard man. The most common include the evolved reptile theory. Some biologists speculate it could be a reptile species that developed humanoid characteristics, possibly a distant evolutionary branch of dinosaurs that survived in isolated swamps, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Many ufologists associate lizard man sightings with the frequent UFO activity reported in the region since the 1950s. The timing is suggestive the most intense creature sightings coincide with periods of increased unexplained light activity in the skies over Lee County. The government experiment. Perhaps the most disturbing theory suggests that the lizard man would be the result of genetic experiments conducted in an undocumented underground military facility. Partially declassified documents reveal that the government conducted secret biological tests in the region between 1960 and 1975. What few investigators noticed, however, was the temporal pattern of the sightings. Analyzing all documented reports since 1940, a distinct cycle emerges. Encounters occur predominantly in 29-year cycles, with peaks of activity that last approximately 13 months before ceasing almost completely. The first documented cycle began in June 1959 and ended in July 1960. The second, from June 1988 to July 1989, exactly when Christopher Davis had his encounter. The third cycle, mathematically predictable, should occur between June 2017 and July 2018, and it did. The recent cycle and silence victims. What the national press largely ignored were the 17 confirmed sightings between June 2017 and July 2018. Unlike previous cycles, this time something had changed. The creature seemed more aggressive, bolder, and smarter. Jason Winters, a biologist from the University of South Carolina who studied the recent reports, noticed a worrying evolution. In the cases from the 50S and 80S, the creature seemed to operate on instinct, attacking when surprised or cornered. In recent sightings, we see indications of calculated behavior, ambushes, distraction, even the use of vocal mimicry to attract victims. The most disturbing case of the recent cycle is also the least publicized. In April 2018, 5 teenagers were camping near Scape or Swamp as part of a challenge to prove the lizard man's non-existence. Only 3 returned. The official investigation concluded that the 2 missing, Marcus Reynolds and Aiden Cooper, probably drowned after consuming alcohol. Their bodies were never found, despite extensive searches. What the investigation omitted were the videos recovered from the survivors' cell phones, briefly showing a greenish figure moving with inhuman speed among the trees moments before the audio captured screams, most chilling. The autopsy of the partial carcass of a large alligator found 2 weeks later revealed human remains in its stomach, but also something inexplicable, a greenish viscous substance covering the reptile's internal tissues, containing DNA that did not match any known species, the underground connection. In 2019, an accidental discovery shed new light on the mystery. During expansion works on State Highway 15, workers discovered an extensive network of natural tunnels beneath the Scape ore swamps, a true underwater labyrinth that could easily harbor a creature unknown to science. Dr. Miguel Santana, a cave ecosystem specialist, was called to investigate the discovery. What he found defies conventional understanding. These tunnels show signs of deliberate modification. Certain sections were clearly widened and reinforced using techniques that are neither natural nor human, at least not from any known culture. Even more intriguing were the hieroglyphs found on the deeper walls of the tunnel's symbols, combining elements of ancient writings with completely unknown forms. Comparative linguistics experts noted disturbing similarities with symbols discovered in underwater archaeological sites in Guatemala and southern Mexico, associated with the cult of a reptilian entity known as the One Who Waits Between the Waters. Carbon dating of organic material found with the symbols indicated an approximate age of 12,000 years, much earlier than what was believed possible for any advanced civilization in the Americas. The excavations were abruptly interrupted after an accident that resulted in the death of 2 researchers. The site was sealed with concrete, and the highway expansion project was redesigned to avoid the area, the guardians of the secret, while the legend of the lizard man grew in the mainstream as a folkloric curiosity. A secret society operated in the shadows of Lee County. Self-titled the Swamp Guardians, this group, consisting primarily of descendants of the region's oldest families, has maintained vigilance over Scape ore swamp for generations. Thomas McElveen, a former member of the group who agreed to speak under condition of anonymity, revealed disturbing details about their mission. "We aren't just monitoring the creature, we're monitoring who seeks it. There are influential people, powerful organizations that know much more than they publicly admit." According to McElveen, the Guardians believe that the lizard man is not just a single creature, but an entire species that inhabits the underground tunnels, emerging in specific cycles related to astronomical alignments. The real question isn't what they are, but why they chose this specific location, and why they're becoming more active in a disturbing twist. McElveen stated that part of the Guardians' mission includes protecting the creature as much as protecting people. There are certain balances that need to be maintained. The swamp demands a price to remain contained. When pressed about the meaning of this cryptic statement, McElveen abruptly ended the interview, but not before leaving a warning. The next cycle will begin in June 2046. It will be different. They are evolving, learning, and the barrier is weakening, the truth in the eyes. The mystery of the South Carolina lizard man remains without definitive resolution. While skeptics dismiss the reports as exaggerations, mistakes, or deliberate fraud, those who have had encounters with the creature carry an unshakable certainty and wounds, both physical and psychological, that cannot be easily explained. Perhaps the most impactful testimony comes from Sheriff Liston Truesdale, who, after his retirement, finally revealed a secret kept for decades. On a night in July 1988, while investigating one of the sighting locations alone, he had his own encounter with the creature. "I spent 30 years publicly denying the existence of that thing, while organizing silent patrols to protect the community," Truesdale confessed. "I looked into its eyes, intelligent, conscious eyes. It wasn't an animal. It was something more. Something that shouldn't be here, but is. And it's waiting." The most disturbing part of Truesdale's confession wasn't the confirmation of the encounter, but his final conviction. The lizard man isn't the predator we fear. It's the guardian that contains something much worse in the depths of those tunnels. And each cycle, the containment weakens a little more. Christopher Davis, the young man whose account in 1988 brought the lizard man to public awareness, died in an unexplained car accident in 2019, just days after contacting researchers with what he called new critical information about his encounter. His computer and notes disappeared from the accident scene. The lizard man of South Carolina continues to defy conventional explanations, existing on the border between myth and reality, between modern folklore and a possibly disturbing biological or archaeological secret. As the next cycle approaches, one question remains. Are we dealing with just an extraordinarily resilient urban legend, or something deeper and more disturbing that challenges our understanding of the natural world and human history? For those who have seen those red eyes glowing in the darkness of the swamp, the answer is already clear, though few are willing to accept it. Epilogue. The pattern repeats as this investigation was being concluded. In April 2025, residents of remote areas near Scape or Swamp began reporting an unexplained increase in disappearances of domestic animals. Rural security cameras captured partial images of a tall, slender figure moving with unusual speed through properties during the night. More alarming, the sightings are occurring 21 years before the predicted start of the next cycle. The pattern is changing. And that may be the scariest thing of all.